Chorley Show.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Brock Lawley program. My name is Brock Lawley. Listen, I just want to dive into this subject matter. I want to present a question. I've just been overwhelmed by the amount of idiocy that I have to endure in the media and at large, and I'll include some social media outlets in this, blaming Christians. So the LGBT community is blaming Christians. Now, I'm going to read you some of this stuff just so we can get on the same page. ACLU blames the Christian right GOP for the Orlando terrorist attack. This is the Washington Examiner. Okay, I continue. This is quote, the odd part is that Christians who want the LGBT community dead are currently attacking Muslims for something that they could have also done #Orlando. Radical right-wing Christians are now acting like they love gay people, only so they can bash Muslims. #Orlando. Christians everywhere must condemn horrible violence against the LGBT community. #Orlando. Homophobic Christians across the country secretly relieved that Orlando's shooter was a Muslim, so they won't get blamed for this one. Republican Christians are not better than Islamists. They love power, money, and hate gays and women's rights. #vote them out. #Orlando. And all you Christians need to hush. Your homophobia contributes to this madness. #hate. What troubles me the most is the possibility of so-called Christians who will call what happened in Orlando righteous. #hate. Orlando religtards continue to fight LGBT rights and yet call for prayer. Actions are sick hypocrites on the wrong side of history. FUCK. Christian. Pray for Orlando? FUCK that. Prayer doesn't do. SHIT. Maybe actually confront the source of violence. White Christian men. #hate. Stop FUCKing, praying for the people in Orlando who are injured and dead. Prayer does FUCK. What should jump out at the curious, intellectually honest mind is the fact that these very people that are claiming hate are filled with hate. I mean, that's just obvious, right? And, you might be able to make a case, hey, maybe they were hurt by the Christian community, some church hurt them or something. That's certainly what I predict it is. But they're just angry and filled with hate towards Christians. But that's not new, and that's not really what I want to talk about that's sort of been established. I want to turn over some new stones here. This is what's interesting. I've always been fascinated the black community continuously votes for Democrats when they've been wounded openly and flagrantly by that party for the better part of a half decade, if not longer. It's always been fascinating. It's very sycophant-like. It's very mindless. It just goes, and it's almost impossible to pierce it. But here, ladies and gentlemen, emerges another form of this. And you have to ask yourself, what is happening here? So a young man, completely sold in, bought in to radical Islam, calls up the authorities, says, I'm murdering these homosexuals because of Islam, because of ISIS, in the name of Islam. And then the deafening response from the homosexual community is to knee-jerk, almost like somebody hit them in the kneecap, blame Christians. It's just fascinating. How do you get this kind of delusion, even at the expense of your own physical safety? I mean, that's a whole nother stratosphere of political brainwashing, is it not? So there's a bunch of potential answers to this question, right? Cowardice is the one that jumps right out. It's been established in this country and maybe even globally that you can say any kind of nonsense about Christians and there's not going to be any consequences for it. They're certainly not going to lop your head off. They're not going to do these things. They're going to say some redneck somewhere or whatever, but people know that the ideology of Christianity is not going to produce this. They're going to equate the fact that God's word teaches that homosexuality is sodomy and sin in the same sort of camp as this sort of slaughter and throwing homosexuals off a building. But of course, that's not true. And that's exemplified by the fact that you have parades everywhere. You have famous politicians. I mean, the homosexual community has had a wild success in normalizing the LGBT community. So it's just on its face, it's ridiculous. They know it's ridiculous. Everybody knows it's ridiculous because the evidence is right in front of our face, right? Homosexuality is not only normalized and safe here, it's glorified here. So that's certainly not it. So I think cowardice has a lot to do with it, right? They're angry, they're hurt, they're probably afraid. They know they can trash Christians. But it still doesn't explain the fact that they're so loyal to this delusion that they're willing to lay on the altar of this PC delusion their own physical safety. That's insane. That's unbelievable. That's novel. And again, I go back to my question with the homosexual community and with the African-American community. How has the left garnered such loyalty that they're able to sacrifice their own self-interest? And in this case, I'm not even talking about economic self-interest. I mean, in the African-American communities, you look at these cities, the schools are in ashes, right? The economic vibrancy of these cities non-existent. How, in the midst of that, how are they still garnering 70, 80, 90% of the vote? Same thing with homosexual community. You know, Islam is fought by conservatives. Islam is often spoken out against by conservative Christians. We're the advocates against this. And yet, they defend Islam, slander, defame, and malign Christians. It's amazing. People in jest will often describe leftism as a mental disorder. The great Michael Savage has done that many times. You know, people laugh at that. But this is the fundamental definition of something like that, right? And I'm genuinely curious about it. It's going to continue. There's a lot of nuanced reasons for it. Politically, I got into that yesterday. The left simply can't take any piece out of the Jenga set of their victimcrat pyramid, right? They can't do that or the whole thing is going to come crumbling down. It's going to be exposed as a ruse. So that's something, but that doesn't explain why that explains why somebody like Clay Aiken, who's in on the political nonsense and who's probably getting a little grease and he's in the establishment, he's in the, these like quote unquote LGBT activists, but it doesn't explain why the average Joe Sixpack or the average homosexual who might have even had a friend in Florida laying in a pile of his own blood turns around and reacts to that, which is just obviously Islam. I mean, there's no wiggle room here. It's obvious Islam. You can't even get any more clear than a perpetrator of the crime calling up the police saying, I am Islamic. I'm doing this in the name of Islam. ISIS, Islam. I mean, you almost got to wonder if the guy's frustrated in the great hereafter. You know, what the heck? Christians are still getting the credit for this? Guys, this is madness. This is total madness. And this is the kind of ideology and the mindset that's making decisions right now, political decisions. So I'm going to present to you a theory. It's nothing more than that, but it's a theory. And let's call this just a known play of lies, a drama of lies that every participant in knows. And I'm going to confine this to sort of power movers and shakers. So what I mean by that is, LGBT journalists, activists, political spokespeople, stuff like that. Everybody here knows that they don't have a threat from Christianity. They have a threat from radical Islam. But they also realize that their loyalty, and at least they're convinced that their political future lies with the Democratic Party, which is the tip of the spear of leftism. So sadly, what's emerging here is you have this whole new version of sort of Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, like in the race racketeering kind of caveat of our society. Made millions and millions of dollars, have become wildly famous at the expense of their own community, at the expense of telling them the truth, at the expense of being sort of the water carriers of these lies and deceptions into their community, leveraging maybe their celebrity or their fame or their credibility into money. Now you have this entire thing happening again under the tent of leftism, one of these little victimcrat communities, where their own well-being, they're going to continue to die. The people that murder them right now, London being wiped out, homosexuality is being wiped out of London because radical Islam is seizing parts of their community. That's happening throughout Europe. Obviously, that's happening in Africa, Boko Haram. This is happening everywhere Islam is. These places are also wiping out Christians. So if anything, there should be a camaraderie, at least in defeating ISIS among these communities. And yet, homosexuals are told that their villainous opposition is still Christians. Why? So they can leverage that politically. And they cannot leverage pointing out the truth, which is radical Islam has severe problems with democracies, elections, free living. Listen, Christians like myself know that homosexuality is a dead end. Homosexuality will leave a person morally bankrupt. They'll leave a person's life hollowed out. But I believe in freedom. They can live how they want to live. And that's the way most Christians believe, the 99.999. The exact opposite is true when you're regarding Islam. And the thing is that perpetrators of this lie among the left, among the gay community that are pushing this lie, they know that too. But they're willing to lay down, in the case of Orlando at least, your life on the altar of these political lies so they can enrich themselves, so they can leverage your votes. It's shameful. And it's so sad to see another part of my great country
being left in the shadows, being left in the delusion, which is what this is, delusion of leftism. They're going to pay the consequences. It wasn't some big famous talking head on MSNBC who claims to speak for the gay community that was slaughtered down in Orlando. No, it's just the average homosexual who's lapping these lies up like milk. This has got to change. It's got to change. Leftism doesn't care about the individual. They care about how to leverage the individual into power. Thank you for listening to the Brock Lawley program. Be a people of fortitude, character, and abounding courage.